Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tony here with Italian Dual Citizenship Assistance. And today we're talking about a brand new proposal that's getting a lot of attention, especially among those who are third generation or more removed from an Italian ancestor. Now, you may have seen headlines already saying that Italy is now looking at requiring a B1 Italian language exam for these later generations. There's a lot of confusion about what this bill means. So in this video, I want to walk you through exactly what was actually proposed, who proposed it, what the B1 level means in real life, and how realistic this proposal really is. And I also want to share something important about language requirements in general and retroactivity, because that principle is at the heart of the constitutional and legal debate around Italian citizenship by descent. Now, as always, this is not legal advice, and I'm not an Italian attorney, but everything that I'm sharing is grounded in the official law that's currently in force, as well as the text of this new bill that has been publicly presented. Now, let's get started with what has not changed. Right now, the law in force is Law 74. This is the converted law from the Tajani Decree, and that law introduced strict limits on citizenship by descent for people born abroad outside of Italy who hold another citizenship. It has imposed a two-generational ceiling for most people. It has imposed a two-generational ceiling with only a few exceptions written into the transitional rules. It has imposed a two-generational ceiling for everyone who had not filed their case in court or submitted an application to a consulate or comune before the March 28th, 2025 deadline. Nothing about that law has changed. Nothing in this new proposal alters the law automatically. This is simply a bill that has been filed in Parliament. It may or may not ever be debated. It may or may not gain support, and it may or may not become part of the citizenship framework in the future. So what exactly is being proposed? Well, this bill comes from MAIE. This is the Associative Movement of Italians Abroad. MAIE is a political party founded in Latin America specifically to represent Italians and their descendants living outside of Italy. Their base is almost entirely in Argentina, Brazil, and other parts of South America, and they've positioned themselves for years as defenders of the Italian diaspora. They're a very small party. They currently have one deputy and one senator, but they are highly active on citizenship issues because that's their mission. They've been extremely critical of the Tajani reform and the generational limits it introduced. So the bill they've proposed is best understood as a counterproposal from the Latin American diaspora. It's their alternative to the new generational restrictions, and it's an attempt to reopen the door for great-grandchildren and beyond. Here's what the text actually says. There are two main pieces. First, the bill aims to restore a clear, direct right to citizenship for the first two generations, children and grandchildren of Italian citizens. Under their proposal, children and grandchildren would be able to apply for citizenship by descent through documentation, regardless of where anyone in the line was born or whether any ancestor lived in Italy. It's essentially an attempt to reinforce the older, more straightforward Ius Sanguinis framework for those generations. Now, second, and this is what's getting all of the attention, the bill says that starting from the third generation, meaning great-grandchildren and further descendants, applicants living abroad would need to demonstrate the B1 level of Italian language. Now, that's the intermediate level required today for such citizenship options as Italian citizenship by marriage. So the structure is children and grandchildren, citizenship by descent through documentation only, great-grandchildren and beyond, citizenship by descent, plus a B1 level language requirement if applying from abroad. Now, before I talk about how realistic this is to take place, let's take a moment to explain what B1 actually means, because that's important for understanding the proposal. B1 is an intermediate level of Italian on the European CEFR scale. At B1, you can manage everyday conversations, understand the main points of clear speech, and share experiences and opinions, as well as talk about plans and read and write simple, connected text. You don't need to be perfect, but you do need to function independently in daily life using Italian. To prove B1 today for citizenship by marriage or residency, you take an exam through one of 4 official institutions. These include CILS from the University of Siena, CELE from the University of Perugia, PLIDA from the Dante Alighieri Society, or Cert.it from Roma Tre University. Now, these exams are offered worldwide and they cost around €100. They test listening, reading, writing, and speaking, and the certificates do not have a legal expiry date. So if a B1 requirement were ever added for citizenship by descent in Italy, it would likely use this same system. Now, here's where I want to share something that I think is important. I personally believe that Italian citizens should learn the Italian language. It deepens your connection to the country, it enriches your life, and it gives meaning to the citizenship that you hold. And if you're planning to live in Italy or even spend significant time there, a B1 level is absolutely reasonable and extremely useful. But, and this is the crucial part, you cannot impose a new language requirement retroactively on people who were already considered Italian citizens by birth under the principles of Ius Sanguinis and under the law in force at the time that they were born. And this is not just a philosophic point, it's a constitutional one. And as I said, this is a big part of the legal and constitutional battling going on over the new citizenship laws. The idea that Italian citizenship by descent is not granted. It exists from birth if your parent was an Italian citizen under the law at that time. Recognition is simply an administrative confirmation of a pre-existing citizenship status. And because of that, Italy cannot legally create new burdens or conditions retroactively for people who were already citizens by birth under the law. And again, that principle, the principle that you cannot retroactively take away or condition a birthright citizenship, is at the heart of the legal and constitutional challenges to Law 74 and the Tajani Decree. This critical issue marks the boundary between what Italy can do going forward and what it cannot do to people born decades ago. So while I wholeheartedly support Italian language learning for Italian citizens by descent, it's very important to note that retroactive language requirements for people who were already Italian citizens by birth would be unconstitutional and fundamentally incompatible with Italy's long-standing Ius Sanguinis doctrine. Okay, so now let's talk honestly about the politics of this proposal. MAIE's bill is, in my view, unlikely to pass in its current form. Why? Because the majority parties just passed a major reform this year. They spent a lot of political time, money, effort defending it. They've worked to justify the generational limits as necessary, and they're not going to reopen this topic immediately, at least in the form of a bill introduced, unless the Constitutional Court forces them to do so. And I believe MAIE knows this. Their goal here is not to pass the bill tomorrow. Their goal is to push back against the generational limits in Law 74, give the diaspora an alternative framework, and influence the conversation if and when the court strikes down part of the current law or this retroactive application that is being looked at in the Constitutional Court and potentially the Supreme Court as well. And here's the part that I do think is interesting. Even if this specific bill goes nowhere, some of the ideas inside it, especially the B1 language requirement for more distant generations, may resurface later, especially if the political landscape shifts or the Constitutional Court requires Parliament to revisit parts of the reform. I definitely think that even if we get favorable decisions from the Italian Supreme Court and from the Italian Constitutional Court, that the current government and the ministry will very likely continue to try to throw up roadblocks and impediments to make it harder for people to qualify in the kind of numbers that they did in the past. And I think many people are going to find, because of that, that their path forward is going to be strongest by going through the courts to challenge everything and to take advantage of these big higher court legal decisions. So what should you do with this information right now? Well, if you already qualify under the current law, then nothing changes for you. If you're in the group that is currently blocked going back to a great-grandparent or beyond, then I would say not to let this proposal give you false hope that things will reopen, at least through this route, to the third generation, great grandparents, and beyond. I think it's possible, definitely, for that to happen through the Constitutional Court, through the Supreme Court, but probably not through a bill like this one. If you're in the group that is currently blocked, then this proposal should remind you that the political conversation is not closed forever. There is ongoing debate, and there are parties pushing for a more inclusive approach, even if that includes a language requirement. And we could see the balance of power shift in the years to come. And regardless of which path you're on, investing in Italian language learning is never a bad idea. It's useful for residency paths, for life in Italy, and for staying connected to your heritage. So to wrap it up, the MAIE bill is a diaspora-driven counterproposal to soften the generational limits in Law 74. It proposes the B1 level of Italian starting from the third generation. It's very unlikely to pass soon, but it may influence future debates, and nothing in this proposal changes the current law. Now, if you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell, and make sure you get notified of new updates as soon as they come out. And if you want to understand how the law applies to your specific family situation, you can always book a consultation with me. The link is in the description. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.